The female pilot gripped the phone tightly, her voice full of annoyance. "There's a black kid causing trouble in the pilot's lounge. Get here immediately." She spun around to face the boy, coldly shouting, "Get out! This place is not for you." "Captain." Rebecca Whitman stared intently at Elijah Jackson, the 16-year-old teen who nervously held up his guest ID. "I'm just waiting for my guide," she said. "I could stay here. I don't care what anyone told you." Whitman interrupted sharply, immediately calling into her radio. "Security, come to the pilot's lounge right now. There's an unauthorized intruder." Elijah stood, frozen, fear flooding his heart. He was just sitting there watching TV, waiting. Was that a crime, Elijah? The 16-year-old black student with bright eyes and a sharp intellect smiled faintly as he looked at the special ID badge pinned to his chest. It was a ticket he had earned after beating out hundreds of other candidates achieved through a heartfelt essay that demonstrated his deep passion for aviation since. He was a child. Elijah could identify different types of aircraft just by the sound of their engines, expertly draw the complex control schematics of modern planes, and often spent hours sitting by his window, mesmerized by the flight paths of the planes that passed across the sky. Now, as he stood in this room, a place reserved for real pilots, his heart raced with excitement and nervousness. Elijah leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the TV screen, showing a documentary on the history of commercial aviation, completely oblivious to the world around him. The door suddenly swung open with a bang, snapping Elijah out of his passionate reverie. Standing in the doorway was a woman in a neat pilot uniform, her shoulders adorned with 4 shiny gold stripes, signaling authority and experience. It was Captain Rebecca Whitman, a veteran pilot white with over 20 years of service at Horizon Airlines. Elijah immediately noticed the surprised yet suspicious look in her eyes as she entered. Captain Whitman frowned, striding quickly toward Elijah, each step like a cold knife cutting through the air. Her voice rang out sharp and cutting enough to make Elijah jump. "You, who let you in here? What are you doing in the pilot's lounge?" Elijah instinctively stood up, his heart racing, trying to remain calm and polite as he explained. "Hello, ma'am. I'm Elijah Jackson. I'm part of Horizon Airlines Career Exploration Program. I'm just waiting for my guide to come back." Whitman smirked, her eyes revealing nothing but disdain and doubt. "Career exploration. This is not a place for play, especially not for an outsider like you. Get out immediately." Her words were like a slap in the face, leaving Elijah stunned. He awkwardly raised his hand, pointing at his ID badge. But ma'am, I was allowed to wait here. I have an ID badge. And Miss Reynolds from HR." Before Elijah could finish, Captain Whitman quickly snatched the badge from his neck, causing the strap to snap with a sharp sound. She flipped the badge over and glanced at it, before furiously declaring, "A fake badge. I knew it. A kid like you doesn't have the right to be in this restricted area. This is a serious security breach." Elijah's face drained of color, shocked and terrified by the harsh accusation. He hadn't even had a chance to process it when Whitman pulled out her radio and coldly called airport security. "I need assistance immediately at the pilot's lounge. We have an intruder in a restricted area, likely using a fake ID. This is a serious situation." Elijah's heart clenched, his entire body trembling. Curious eyes from outside the lounge began to gather. Captain Whitman's baseless but firm accusation was turning what should have been the most important day of Elijah's life into a nightmare, just because of his skin color, just because of the deep-seated prejudice of one adult. Elijah's lifelong dream was now hanging by a thread, and the bright future he had fought so hard to achieve could be crushed in an instant. Elijah stood rooted to the spot, his eyes red, but holding back tears with all his strength. He understood the tragedy had just begun. The crackling sound of the radio from Captain Whitman pierced the silence of the break room, immediately drawing the attention of nearby airport staff. Elijah stood, frozen, feeling all eyes slowly turning toward him, each gaze like a needle pricking at his self-esteem. He gathered every bit of courage and stepped closer, his voice trembling with a mix of confusion and nervousness. "Ma'am, I didn't use a fake ID. Miss Reynolds from the HR department personally brought me here. I've been waiting for almost 20 minutes, and I haven't done anything wrong." But Captain Whitman paid no heed to Elijah's words. Her eyes were icy cold, completely indifferent to the panic clearly written on his face. She clenched the ID badge tightly in her hand, raising it as if it were evidence of a serious crime she had just uncovered, and turned toward the door, raising her voice to address the gathering airport staff and pilots. "Everyone pay attention. We are constantly trained to identify and prevent security threats. This is a textbook case. A young man using a fake ID to infiltrate the pilot's area, possibly gathering sensitive information or sabotaging airline property." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, and some began to look at Elijah with suspicion and clear disdain. The feeling of isolation quickly overwhelmed him, his heart pounding in anger and helplessness at the unfairness he was enduring. Elijah scanned the room, hoping to see Miss Reynolds or anyone who could vouch for his innocence, but no one stepped forward. At that moment, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. 2 airport security officers entered with serious expressions, quickly approaching. "Aile, as directed by Captain Whitman." She pointed directly at Elijah, speaking with a firm, unwavering tone. "That's him. I want you two to take him out of here and conduct a thorough search. I'm sure this is an intentional breach of security." One of the officers, a middle-aged man with a stern face, scanned Elijah from head to toe before speaking in a firm but professional manner. "Young man, please come with us. We need to verify your identity and clarify the situation." Elijah instinctively stepped back, his voice breaking with fear, but striving to remain calm and logical. "I was really allowed to be here. I'm a part of the Aviation Experience program. Please contact Miss Reynolds." "I'm not lying." But Captain Whitman interjected once again, ruthlessly, cutting off Elijah's last hope. Her sharp gaze offered no sympathy or doubt in her judgment. "I don't want to waste any more time. He's violated a restricted area, carrying a fake ID, and has been making unverified excuses. You need to handle this immediately. This is about flight safety. It cannot be taken lightly." Her words felt like a sentence being delivered right there, and Elijah was thrust into a state of panic. Everything around him seemed to spin out of control. Sweat began to bead on his forehead as the full weight of the nightmare sank in. The injustice was glaring before him, yet he could do nothing to fight back or change it. As the 2 security officers stepped closer, Elijah shakily pulled out his phone, his voice breaking as he pleaded, "Please let me call my dad. He can explain everything." Whitman scowled with a sneer, crossing her arms and speaking in a mocking tone that only Elijah could feel, the full weight of disdain. "And go ahead. Call him. Though I'm sure your father won't be able to help in this situation. I'll make sure your parents, probably working as janitors here, will be fired for letting their son cause trouble at this airport." The room fell silent at her cruelty and blatant prejudice, but no one dared to speak up for Elijah. He stood, frozen eyes welling up with tears, but not crying, his hands trembling as he dialed his father's number. Each long ring echoed in the silence, each passing second stretching on forever. amplifying the tension and tragedy in that moment. Elijah could only hope that his father would arrive in time to save him from the abyss of this cruel injustice. The phone's ringing seemed endless each chime, tightening Elijah's heart with anxiety. His eyes were fixed on the phone screen, nervously waiting for his father's familiar voice to appear. But at that very moment, when reality was becoming darker than ever before, beautiful memories from the past suddenly flooded back, gently soothing the pain that was tearing at his heart. Elijah vividly remembered the first time he stepped onto an airplane. It was on his 6th birthday, and his father, David Jackson, had just taken a significant position at the Federal Aviation Administration (FAA) to celebrate his son's birthday. He secretly arranged for a special tour at Dulles International Airport near Washington, D.C. At that time, Elijah was just a small boy with bright eyes, standing beneath the wing of the massive Boeing 777, watching the plane rise into the sky like a mighty and majestic iron bird. He remembered the feeling at it, that moment, a sensation that was both a struck and happy, mixed with a deep desire to conquer the vast skies. After that special tour, Elijah constantly asked his father about everything related to aviation. He became fascinated by how these giant airplanes could glide so smoothly through the sky, the principles of aerodynamics, and how pilots could navigate planes through Army skies safely, despite his busy job managing flight safety. Nationwide, David always made time to sit beside his son, patiently explaining every detail in depth, and in every conversation, he would always tell Elijah one thing, that he could become a great pilot, if he was brave enough and persistent enough in the months that followed. Elijah began filling his bedroom with airplane models of all sizes, from classic planes like the Wright Flyer to the most advanced aircrafts in the world, such as the Boeing 787 Dreamliner and the Airbus A350. His room's walls quickly became covered in posters of airplanes' engine schematics and historical information about the aviation industry. His father once smiled and joked that his room looked like a mini aviation museum. Not just a passion. Elijah also made his dream of becoming a pilot a reality through hard training. He frequently used flight simulator software, patiently practicing basic flying maneuvers, learning how to take off and land, and gradually progressing to handling emergency scenarios in virtual flights. Many times, his mother had to remind Elijah to go to bed early, since he would stay up late practicing his flying skills on the computer. But David, on the other hand, always silently encouraged his son, knowing that every hour spent practicing brought Elijah one step closer to his big dream. However, the journey toward that dream was not without its challenges. Elijah encountered doubt from those around him, remarks from people who didn't believe that a small black boy could aspire to become a PID. During those moments, David would always appear at just the right time, placing a steady hand on his son's shoulder and looking into his eyes with unwavering determination. Elijah, others may doubt you, but never allow yourself to doubt who you are. You belong to the sky, and the sky will always be open for you. Those encouraging words helped Elijah overcome his most difficult moments, and when the greatest opportunity came, the selection process for the Horizon Airlines Special Aviation Experience Program for outstanding students, Elijah knew he couldn't let it slip away. He spent weeks preparing his application essay, writing about his passion for aviation, the unforgettable experiences with his father, and most of all, his burning desire to become a pilot on the day the results were announced. Elijah was so nervous that he couldn't open the letter on his own. It was David who had to encourage him and open the letter for him. The moment his father smiled brightly and told Elijah that he had beaten hundreds of applicants to be chosen. Elijah couldn't hold back his tears. It was not just a victory, it was a confirmation of his dream and the years of relentless effort he had put in. Elijah hugged his father tightly, crying with immense joy, silently thanking him for always believing in him and standing by his side through this challenging journey. But Elijah never imagined that today, the first day of the special program, a day that should have been the greatest turning point, would turn into a nightmare. Captain Whitman's doubt and prejudice felt like sharp knives slowly slicing away at Elijah's purest dream piece by piece. The things she said, her attitude all seemed to declare that his dream would always be limited by his skin color and background. Elijah clenched the phone tightly, trying to swallow the lump in his throat. He remembered his father's words and silently told himself to stay strong, to stand firm in protecting the dream he had nurtured for so many years. For now, more than ever, Elijah understood that the real battle for his dream had begun. And no matter how desperate the circumstances became, Elijah still believed his father would show up in time to rescue him from the darkness that prejudice and injustice had cast over him. The beautiful memories of his father and the dream of flying, which had just managed to soothe some of Elijah's fear, were immediately extinguished by the powerful footsteps of the airport security team. Two men in gray uniforms swiftly entered the room, their faces cold and serious, their sharp gazes as though observing a real suspect. Elijah instinctively took a step back, feeling as though he had committed some serious wrong. Though he couldn't quite understand it, one of the security officers, a tall man with a stern face, glanced briefly around the room before locking his gaze firmly on Elijah. He approached him with determination, his voice clear but full of threat. As he spoke, "Young man, you need to explain yourself immediately. How did you get into this pilot's lounge?" Elijah swallowed hard, trying to control his breathing, which was becoming rapid. His eyes were wide with fear, but he still struggled to keep a shred of calm. He took a deep breath and slowly spoke. "I'm Elijah Jackson. I'm part of the Career Experience program at Horizon Airlines. I was brought in here by Miss Tanya Reynolds from HR, but she's gone outside to handle an urgent matter." The security officer listened to his explanation and then turned to Captain Whitman as if seeking confirmation of the truthfulness of Elijah's statement. But instead of acknowledging or calmly reconsidering the situation, Whitman shook his head slightly, shrugged with a mocking expression, and responded with a cold, skeptical tone. "I've been working at this airline for nearly 20 years. It's never happened that a student could enter the pilot's lounge without supervision. His ID looks fake. Just check carefully. You'll see clearly that statement struck at the heart of everyone's trust, and it immediately changed the attitude of the security team." The tall man moved closer to Elijah, his eyes filled with doubt. "Hand over your ID and explain where you got this badge from. Who gave it to you?" Elijah shakily opened his jacket pocket. Fumbling for his small wallet that contained his student ID, he once again tried to explain as clearly and sincerely as possible. "I'm not lying. Miss Reynolds gave me this badge this morning with my name and photo on it. Please, you can call Miss Reynolds to verify what I'm saying. I truly have no bad intentions." However, his heartfelt explanation was drowned out by whispers of doubt from the other employees and pilots who were gathering more and more around the door. Their curious and skeptical glances were mixed with caution, all directed at Elijah as if just by looking at him, they could determine whether he was innocent or guilty. No one spoke up to defend him. No one said a word to confirm that he was telling the truth. Elijah painfully realized that he was completely alone in this battle against prejudice. Captain Whitman, fully exploiting the psychological advantage on her side, spoke again with a serious eyes expression, deliberately emphasizing the imagined danger. Look carefully. This is exactly how people with ill intentions infiltrate sensitive areas like this. We can't afford to be careless, especially when aviation security must always be a top priority. Who can guarantee he doesn't have more dangerous plans? Those unfounded accusations immediately created a stronger wave of doubt in the minds of everyone present. Some pilots started shaking their heads in irritation, their eyes seeming to blame Elijah for causing the trouble. Others quietly took out their phones to take pictures or videos, their curiosity tinged with malicious intent. Elijah felt his heart shattering in despair. The absurdity, injustice, and prejudice created an enormous pressure that weighed down on him. The tall security officer took another step forward, pushing Elijah against the corner of the wall. He extended his hand, his voice cold and unwavering, showing no mercy. "We'll have to take you out of here for a more thorough check if you continue to refuse to cooperate. We have to consider this as resistance against law enforcement." Elijah could clearly feel the terrifying pressure from his words and actions. He realized he had fallen into a trap of doubt, too heavy and intense. Elijah had never imagined that the pure dream he had built throughout his childhood could collapse so quickly, just because of a prejudiced glance from a stranger. He took a deep breath, his tears threatening to spill, but he tried to hold them back in despair. Elijah once again glanced down at his phone, hoping his father would appear just in time to help him escape this dreadful situation. But the phone screen remained painfully silent, and Elijah realized in that moment that he was completely alone, trapped in the most bitter web of doubt he had ever faced in his life. Elijah's eyes scanned the break room, desperately seeking even a hint of sympathy in the sea of people surrounding him, but all he received were cold, suspicious glances, or worse, the indifferent, heartbreaking apathy of those around him. He had never felt so utterly alone, as though all the trust and hope he had built over the years had suddenly vanished. In just a few fleeting moments, he was pushed into a corner, his back pressed against the cold wall, his hands clenched tightly together. As though trying to hold on to the last shred of composure he had left, the tall security officer never took his eyes off Elijah, his gaze sharp and stern, while his colleague quickly muttered something into his radio captain. Whitman stood, not far off, arms crossed, a smug expression on her face. She glanced over at Elijah, a look of satisfaction crossing her face as she saw the fear and panic on his. Whitman stepped forward deliberately, letting her voice echo clearly through the room, making sure everyone could hear. "This is exactly why I always warn that we must never, ever be careless, even for a second, with airport security. He may look harmless, but who knows what's going on inside his head. A moment of carelessness could lead to unimaginable consequences." Her words struck Elijah like a cold blade to the heart, transforming him from a passionate student with noble dreams into a dangerous threat in the eyes of everyone around him. Elijah could see the fear, concern, and even anger on the faces of the pilots and airport staff, the very people he had admired just minutes ago and had longed to be like, unable to endure it any longer. Elijah shakily tried once more to speak, his voice hoarse but filled with desperation. "Please, can I call my dad? I swear, I didn't do anything wrong. He can confirm this. Please. The security man stared at him for a long moment, then reluctantly nodded. Elijah quickly grabbed his phone, his hands trembling so much that he almost couldn't dial his father's number. His heart pounded wildly, his breath coming in short gasps, and every ring of the phone only heightened his fear. Elijah silently prayed his father would pick up immediately, but each ring seemed to stretch out, as if daring his patience to break while waiting. Whitman continued speaking to the others around her in a voice full of overzealous caution, deliberately sowing doubt in everyone's mind. We've been trained specifically for situations like this. People with ill intentions will always try to act innocent, always using logical explanations to hide their true motives. I've seen many similar situations over the past 20 years. Trust me, the way he's acting is definitely suspicious. People began to whisper among themselves, their eyes once again shifting toward Elijah, filled with more doubt and discomfort than before. They no longer saw him as an innocent teenager, but as a genuine threat, someone to be wary of and avoided. Never had Elijah imagined that in the blink of an eye, his entire future one he had worked so hard for could be at risk of disappearing because of an unfounded accusation from a complete stranger. Elijah, knew all too well the consequences of something like this. Just one moment being considered a threat to aviation security would forever close the door to his dream of becoming a pilot. Reputation, scholarships, career, opportunities, all would dissolve into nothing because of a moment of cruel prejudice. Finally, the phone stopped ringing, and his father's familiar voice boomed with strength. "Hey, Elijah, what's going on?" But hearing his father's voice only made Elijah panic even more, his emotions overwhelming him as he struggled to get the words out clearly. "Dad, I'm at the airport, and they're saying I illegally entered the pilot's break room. They don't believe me. I don't know what to do." There was a sudden silence on the other end, and for a brief moment, Elijah felt as though his heart had stopped after a pause. His father, David Jackson, spoke firmly and with calm resolve. "Elijah, stay calm. I'm on my way. Don't leave that spot. I'll take care of this personally." That short statement from his father made Elijah burst into tears, both relieved and terrified by what he had just endured. Whitman saw Elijah crying and smirked mockingly, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "So you had to call your parents after all? Huh. Everyone's like that. You should have known your place from the start." The insult stung Elijah, but he could do nothing but remain silent, waiting for his father to come to his rescue. Never had he wished for his father's arrival more desperately. For now, his dreams, which he had nurtured for so long, hung on the brink of total destruction. And his father was the only one who could pull him back from this nightmare. The cant contemptuous. Whispers of Captain Whitman still echoed clearly in Elijah's ears, each cold word cutting into his heart like a sharp knife. It seemed that calling his father for help not only didn't make things better, but instead increased the suspicion and judgmental glares from the crowd. Whitman recognized Elijah's weakness, and she wasted no opportunity to exploit it to the fullest. Whitman took another step into the middle of the room. Standing tall, her posture full of authority and confidence, as if she were in front of a public trial where she was both the accuser and the judge. Her piercing eyes swept across everyone, witnessing the situation, then stopped on Elijah's face with an indescribably cold gaze. She raised her voice loud enough for everyone inside and outside the room to hear. "I hope everyone here understands the seriousness of this issue. We cannot simply dismiss this as a small misunderstanding. Not only did he unlawfully enter a restricted area for pilots, but he could also be an industrial spy, someone trying to steal sensitive information from our airline. The room fell almost completely silent. After that grave declaration, Elijah felt a cold chill run down his spine. His eyes widened in disbelief, unable to comprehend the absurd and cruel accusations being thrown at him. An industrial spy, just because he sat in the pilot's lounge and watched a documentary on aviation, he was now being turned into a dangerous spy. The murmurs of the crowd spread quickly, with every gaze turning toward Elijah. Filled with doubt and judgment, he could feel his honor and dignity being ruthlessly trampled. But Whitman didn't stop there. She continued, her tone dripping with sarcasm and malice. He just called his parents. I'm guessing they must be some janitors or cleaning staff working here at the airport. Maybe this is how they use their children to sneak into restricted areas. Who knows what their true intentions are? The snickers and mocking glances began to spread among the employees and pilots watching the situation unfold. Elijah felt as though his heart was being crushed, his whole body shaking with anger and shame. He clenched his fists so tightly that his nails dug into his palms, doing everything he could to hold back the tears threatening to spill throughout his life. Elijah had always been proud of his father, David Jackson, a respected man, full of dignity, who had dedicated almost his entire life to ensuring the safety and advancement of the country's aviation industry. Elijah had seen his father stay up all night handling aviation safety crises, had witnessed his resolve and bravery when facing tough challenges, and now, right before his eyes, his beloved father was being cruelly belittled by Whitman. The humiliation, the public degradation of his integrity, almost shattered Elijah, but he still stood firm, his eyes locking onto Whitman with a determined look that carried a touch of unmistakable hurt. He understood that at this moment, any display of anger or weakness could be exploited by Whitman to further cement her accusations. Whitman caught Elijah's gaze and seemed momentarily surprised by the unusual resilience of the boy, but instead of retreating, she became even more determined to push the situation further. As if she wanted to prove to everyone that she was always right, Whitman raised her voice again. Just think, if we hadn't caught this boy today, how serious could the consequences have been? The safety of hundreds of passengers and crew members could have been jeopardized by just the slightest lapse in our vigilance. This time, those around her began nodding in agreement, as if they fully believed everything Whitman said. Elijah felt his heart being torn into pieces. He swallowed the pain choking his throat, and with a trembling voice but unwavering determination, he spoke, "Ma'am, I'm not a spy, and my parents are not janitors here. Please don't insult them like that." But Elijah's feeble protest only seemed to satisfy Whitman further. She smirked coldly, her voice dripping with disdain. "Oh, I'm not insulting anyone. I'm just presenting a very realistic possibility. The truth is a bit hard to accept, isn't it?" Elijah could barely stand anymore, his legs shaking from indignation and humiliation. But he refused to let himself fall before this cruelty. Elijah knew he had to hold on to his dignity, not just for himself, but for his father, who had always taught him that a person's worth is defined by how they face adversity. Now, all Elijah could do was stand there in silent pain, waiting for his father to arrive and rescue him from these cruel and unfounded accusations. He told himself to be strong, to endure just a little longer, because Elijah knew for certain that his father would never let this unjust cruelty continue for much longer. The lingering echo of Captain Whitman's cold insults still reverberated in Elijah's ears, making his mind almost numb with the deep shame and hurt. Every suspicious glance from the crowd felt like invisible threads tightening around his heart, and every breath he took was heavy and painful. Elijah struggled to stay upright, his legs threatening to give way under the weight of the cruelty and prejudice that surrounded him. His hand trembled as he gripped his phone tightly, as if it were the only lifeline left for him to cling to. In this moment, Elijah lowered his head, trying to take a deep breath to steady his voice as he called his father for the second time. His trembling fingers fumbled with the familiar numbers, each beep echoing like it was extending the fear rising inside him. Finally, his father. David Jackson spoke on the other end, his voice warm, yet authoritative, almost making Elijah break down with relief. "Elijah, it's Dad. Are you okay?" As soon as he heard that familiar voice, all the emotions Elijah had been holding back suddenly erupted in a fleeting moment. His voice cracked, filled with panic and weakness more than he had expected. "Dad, they called me a spy," said. "I trespassed, and no one will listen to my side. I really didn't do anything wrong. But they don't believe me. Dad, can you come here right now?" David paused for a moment, and that silence felt like it froze Elijah's heart. But then his father's voice rose strong and decisive enough to alleviate some of the fear in Elijah's chest. "Elijah, listen to me. You cannot be afraid or lose your composure any longer. I will. Head to the airport immediately to clear this up. Stay strong, and I won't let anyone disrespect you again." His father's firm and authoritative promise felt like a glimmer of hope shining through the dense darkness of despair Elijah was sinking into. Elijah took a deep breath, wiping away the tear threatening to fall. He knew that in this moment, he had to hold on, not only for himself, but also for his father, who was on his way to restore his dignity and his dreams. While Elijah was still trying to regain his composure, Whitman spoke again, seemingly intent on crushing the last shred of hope Elijah had just received. Her cold, mocking voice echoed once more, deliberately raised so that Elijah could hear clearly. "What a touching performance. I bet her father is now rushing to get away from his post in the restroom area to come here and clear up the little darling's name. But unfortunately, we need to resolve this quickly. Airport security can't wait for such theatrics." The people around them laughed. Softly, expressions mocking and in agreement. With the spiteful words, Elijah felt his throat tighten, the frustration and anger so intense that he could hardly keep his composure yet. He bit his lip, holding his gaze steady and resolute as he looked directly at Whitman, refusing to let her see his weakness again. Whitman raised an eyebrow at Elijah's gaze, clearly surprised by his sudden strength, but she refused to back down, for she had gone too far, and now she couldn't retreat. She quickly turned to the security officers and coldly issued an order. "If his parents don't show up immediately, I suggest you take him out of here right away. We've wasted too much time on this already." The two security officers exchanged uncertain glances, but they ultimately moved closer to Elijah, as if ready to carry out Whitman's orders at any moment. Elijah felt every muscle in his body tense, but at that moment, one of the security officer phones rang. He quickly answered, and his face shifted to one of surprise and clear hesitation. He hung up, walked over to his colleague, and whispered something, causing both of them to stop and exchange a hesitant look. Whitman noticed this sudden shift and frowned in annoyance, her voice sharp with irritation. "What's going on? Is there a problem that you're hesitating like this?" The security officer hesitated, unsure of how to explain, finally responding in a soft tone just loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. We've just been informed that a senior official from the FAA is on their way here to handle this. Personally, we'll need to wait a little longer. Whitman stood stunned for a moment, but quickly regained her confidence. She shrugged, her voice dripping with sarcasm. FAA official. How interesting. I'm very curious to see which person from the FAA is so free that they would care about a child like this. Elijah heard every mocking word clearly, but this time he no longer felt weak. His heart was stronger now, fueled by his father's promise. Elijah knew that his father, David Jackson, the respected and powerful man, was on his way, bringing with him the last glimmer of hope that would help Elijah escape this hopeless nightmare. The atmosphere in the pilot's break room was thick with suspicion and tension, like a ticking time bomb, ready to explode at any moment. The security staff remained cautious, not daring to act, despite Captain Whitman's intense gaze urging them on. Whitman stood there, her face betraying impatience mixed with frustration. Meanwhile, while Elijah struggled to hold on to his remaining strength, trying not to collapse under the immense pressure weighing down on him. Just when Elijah thought he couldn't hold on any longer, the walkie-talkie in the hand of one of the security officers suddenly crackled to life with a loud, clear sound. A firm voice broke through the tense silence, shattering the heavy air in the room. Attention, all units of VIP group is entering the pilot's break area. Ensure the area is clear and be ready to assist. The sudden announcement caused everyone in the room to jump, heads turning toward the large door, all waiting to see who the important guest might be. Whispers quickly spread across the room, a mixture of curiosity and surprise. Whitman furrowed her brow, clearly annoyed by this unexpected development that interrupted and sabotaged her plan to deal with Elijah. She moved closer to the security officer, speaking in a low voice, but still sharp. Which VIP could possibly barge in? During such an important moment, I demand you take this boy out of here immediately. However, the two security officers seemed to have received some higher order directive, gently shaking their heads in a silent but significant gesture, as if to say the situation was beyond Whitman's control. Just seconds later, the door to the break room swung open, and strong, purposeful footsteps rang out quickly across the shiny floor. Elijah lifted his head, his heart nearly bursting with emotion as he recognized the person quickly approaching him. His father, David Jackson, the administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. Behind Mr. Jackson was a team of high-ranking FAA officials in sharp suits, their expressions serious and commanding. This sudden appearance immediately silenced the room, as if everyone collectively held their breath to see what would happen next. No one dared speak, only exchanging looks of shock and trepidation. Following Jackson's every move with wide eyes, Whitman froze, her eyes wide in disbelief as she recognized the powerful man heading straight for Elijah, someone she had thought was just an ordinary janitor at the airport. Her face quickly shifted from one of confidence to one of intense worry and shock. David Jackson walked swiftly toward Elijah, his expression a mix of concern and affection. He gently placed his hand on his trembling son's shoulder, his voice full of authority but incredibly warm. "Elijah, are you okay? I'm here now. Don't worry anymore." Those few words felt like a miracle cure, bringing Elijah an immediate sense of safety and peace that he needed more than ever. Elijah nodded, struggling to hold back the tears that streamed down his face. He knew that his father had arrived, and now he would no longer be alone. Mr. Jackson tightened his grip on his son's shoulder for reassurance before turning around, his eyes hard and cold as he faced Captain Whitman. His voice was clear and authoritative, sending a shiver down everyone's spine. "I am David Jackson, Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration. I have been fully briefed on the situation involving my son, Elijah Jackson, and I am deeply shocked to learn that my son has been falsely accused right here at this airport. Whitman's face turned pale, her voice faltering and filled with embarrassment as she weakly tried to justify herself. Mr. Jackson, I didn't know he was your son. We were just trying to ensure the airport's safety. Mr. Jackson cut her off coldly, not allowing her to explain any further. The safety of the airport is the highest priority for the FAA and for me personally, but that does not give you the right to abuse your authority, to make unfounded accusations and humiliate a child based on personal prejudice and bias. What you have done not only severely damages my son's dignity, but also reveals a larger issue with how a seasoned pilot like you treats the public and your colleagues. Every word from Mr. Jackson was like a powerful gust of wind sweeping through the room, tearing down the false facade Whitman had built to cover up her wrongdoings. The others in the room now stared at Whitman with wide eyes, some showing visible disappointment and disapproval. Whitman stood, frozen, her mind in chaos, under the overwhelming pressure of Mr. Jackson's sudden appearance. She could no longer speak, only lowering her head in embarrassment and shame. Elijah stood beside his father, his heart slowly calming, a sense of profound gratitude flooding through him. He realized how fragile the line between despair and hope truly was. But now, with his father by his side, hope had prevailed, and he had regained his faith in justice and righteousness. David Jackson's appearance not only helped Elijah reclaim his dignity, but also completely shifted the balance of power, turning the nightmare Elijah had just endured into an unexpected turning point, opening the door for the truth to be revealed before everyone's eyes. The tense atmosphere in the pilot's lounge seemed to freeze when Mr. David Jackson's sudden appearance, accompanied by a group of senior FAA officials, completely turned the situation around. But Captain Whitman, deep in her excessive confidence and arrogance, still hadn't grasped the reality in front of her. With her stubborn and obstinate attitude, she continued to make accusations to support her position. I take full responsibility for my actions. Aviation safety is no joke. We can't overlook suspicious situations like this. This boy. Whitman's words abruptly halted when her gaze met the stern face of Mr. David Jackson, standing only a few steps away from her. His face was cold and dignified. His eyes locked onto Whitman's as if he could see right through her soul in that moment. Whitman finally realized that the situation had completely spiraled out of her control. Her face shifted from confident to stunned, then quickly turned pale. Her eyes widened in fear as she realized the true identity of the powerful man standing before her. The pride she had always displayed vanished in an instant, leaving behind a woman who was now utterly confused and trembling under the immense pressure of an unexpected reality. The room fell into absolute silence, a heavy and suffocating silence, far more oppressive than any sound that had come before. Airport staff pilots and security personnel stood frozen, their eyes constantly shifting between Mr. Jackson and Whitman, as if witnessing the most dramatic power shift they had ever seen. No one dared to speak. All of them were acutely aware that the balance of power had now completely changed after what seemed like an endless silence. Mr. Jackson finally spoke, his voice low yet powerful, each word clearly enunciated. Captain Whitman, I want to know why you believe my son is a threat to airport security, and what made you conclude that the access card he's wearing is counterfeit. Whitman swallowed hard, clearly trying to find a reasonable explanation, but all the strength and firmness she had once displayed had vanished. Her voice trembled, uncertain and clearly flustered. Mr. Jackson, I I didn't know Elijah was your son. I just wanted to ensure aviation safety. Mr. Jackson didn't let her finish. His gaze grew even colder and more severe. You didn't answer my question directly. I asked what evidence you had to make. Such a serious accusation against my son. Do you think that a 16-year-old student enrolled in an official vocational training program with the airline is an industrial spy? This isn't just a grave insult to Elijah, but also an affront to the very security procedures and pilot training that the FAA is striving to uphold. In the aviation industry, his words were like steel strikes, strong and precise, shattering every weak defense Whitman was trying to offer. Whitman lowered her head, her face turning pale desperately, trying to justify her unreasonable actions, but completely powerless. Those around them, who had either supported or doubted Elijah before now, turned to look at Whitman with disappointment, surprise, and a hint of discomfort. Mr. Jackson turned to the security personnel. His voice now, stern and clear. You should all know better than anyone else that your job is to protect safety, not to follow unfounded requests based on anyone's personal biases. Keeping an innocent boy here and treating him like a suspect is absolutely unacceptable. I demand that you immediately revoke this action and restore Elijah the respect he deserves. Two security officers quickly lowered their heads, clearly embarrassed and uncomfortable for having acted without due consideration. One of them stepped forward, bowed slightly to Elijah, and spoke softly but sincerely. We sincerely apologize for what has happened. Please forgive us for this mistake. Elijah, still standing next to his father, felt his heart filled with a sense of relief and profound emotion. He said nothing, simply nodding gently enough to convey the forgiveness and tolerance his father had taught him from a young age. At this point, Whitman seemed to lose all her strength. She could no longer stand upright. The looks of admiration and trust she had once received were now replaced with contempt and clear disappointment. She knew that the image and reputation she had painstakingly built over more than 20 years had completely crumbled in just a few minutes. The moment of power reversal happened so fast. But for Elijah, it lasted long enough for him to understand the true value of justice and real power. Standing next to his father, he felt more than ever the deep meaning of the words his father had taught him. No one has the right to strip you of your dignity unless you allow them to. And from that moment on, Elijah decided that he would never let anyone do that to him again. The heavy silence in the room seemed to stretch on endlessly, with every gaze focused on David Jackson, the powerful man. Standing tall in the center, like an immovable fortress, he maintained his imposing stance, his sharp eyes fixed directly on Captain Whitman, as if searching for a reasonable explanation from her for the wrong that had just occurred in this moment. Everyone knew that this was no longer a casual conversation, but a strict interrogation regarding the ethics and professional responsibility of a senior pilot. Like Whitman, David Jackson's deep, cold voice broke the tense silence, word carrying a heavy authority. Captain Whitman, I expect a clear and convincing answer from you. On what basis did you conclude that Elijah posed a threat to airport security? What evidence did you rely on when you called security and publicly accused my son of being an industrial spy? At that moment, Whitman seemed cornered, her confused expression more evident than ever. She looked around, as if searching for sympathy from those present. But all she received was silence full of reproach. Whitman stammered, her voice hesitant as she tried to justify her mistake. Mr. Jackson, I I truly meant no harm. I was just doing my duty as a pilot, ensuring the safety of this restricted area. Elijah was sitting alone in the pilot's lounge with a badge that I thought was suspicious. I was just following security procedures. Jackson raised an eyebrow, his expression still cold and stern. He took a step closer, causing Whitman to instinctively step back. His voice rang out with even more weight cutting through her feeble defense. You followed security procedures. Did you? Did you properly verify Elijah's identity? Or did you simply jump to conclusions based on personal bias? I reviewed the situation as soon as I was informed and Elijah's ID was fully valid with all the necessary clearance for him to be here. What disappoints me greatly is that you hastily made an incorrect judgment, turning my son into a suspect in front of so many people. Whitman swallowed. Trying to hold on to the last shred of dignity she had left, she continued to justify herself, her voice growing weaker and more trembling. Mr. Jackson, I really didn't know. He was your son. If I had known it was your son, I certainly wouldn't have acted that way. Her careless remark immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. Everyone, including Elijah and the FAA agents with Jackson, immediately understood the deep implication of her prejudice statement. Whitman immediately regretted her words, but once spoken, they could not be taken back. Jackson stood still. For a moment, his gaze piercing into Whitman, unyielding, his voice became even more serious and sharp. If you had known he was my son, you just said, Captain Whitman. This clearly shows that the real issue here is not whether Elijah is dangerous, but your prejudice and discrimination against those you deem unworthy of trust simply because of their appearance as a senior pilot for Horizon Airlines. You should have the clearest understanding of responsibility and professional ethics. It is unacceptable that you let your personal bias influence your judgment and decisions in your job. Whitman lowered her head, her face pale with shame and fear. Everyone could clearly see her collapse in confusion. Someone who had always prided herself on her power and status. The airport staff and other pilots who witnessed this felt deeply disappointed as they saw the truth behind the veneer of authority and professionalism they once admired. Jackson continued, this time slowing his speech, but maintaining his stern demeanor. I want everyone to understand this. The FAA will never tolerate any form of discrimination or bias in the aviation industry. Those of us in this field must understand that our job is to ensure safety and fairness for all passengers and staff. I do not want to witness any more incidents like this in the future. He then turned to the FAA staff, with him gently issuing an order. I request an immediate thorough investigation into Captain Whitman's actions today, including her handling of security and her conduct toward Elijah. We need to clarify and resolve this issue completely. The FAA agent immediately nodded in agreement, while Whitman stood. Frozen, her head bowed low, completely powerless in the face of the current situation. She knew full well that her career future at Horizon Airlines and within the aviation industry was now at serious risk. Elijah, standing beside his father, felt his heart finally calm down. The strength and fairness his father had just shown helped him understand more clearly than ever the true value of courage, belief, and justice. And standing firm against wrongdoings, this moment was a valuable lesson for everyone present, showing that true power doesn't lie in position or rank, but in fairness, integrity, and self-respect. Elijah felt prouder of his father than ever before, and he promised himself that no matter where he would be in the future, he would always uphold the dignity and courage his father had taught and protected today. While the room remained heavy with the tense silence from Mr. David Jackson's stern, questioning, one of the senior FAA officials quickly opened the tablet in his hands, walked over to him, and whispered something. Mr. Jackson listened intently, then gave a subtle nod of agreement, his gaze never leaving Captain Whitman, who was now almost crumpling under the enormous psychological pressure bearing down on her shoulders. Immediately, the FAA official stepped forward, his voice clear and decisive, breaking the suffocating silence. Mr. Jackson, everyone, we've just conducted a thorough review of the security camera footage in the pilot rest area, and we've gathered some very clear and objective evidence related to the incident that just occurred as he spoke. He connected the tablet to the large screen in the break room. A video began to play clearly, showing Elijah entering the pilot's break room with Tanya Reynolds from the HR department in the video. Miss Reynolds personally handed Elijah a special access card, pointed out the designated seating area, and then quickly left to handle her work. The entire process followed, protocol clear and transparent. The video continued, showing Elijah sitting quietly in the chair, doing nothing suspicious. The boy was focused on the documentary playing on the TV screen, not even leaving his seat. Only when Captain Whitman entered and began questioning him roughly and without basis did Elijah stand up, attempting to explain the situation. When the video ended, the room erupted with murmurs of disbelief. All eyes turned toward Whitman, filled with reproach and disappointment for the serious wrong she had just committed. Whitman stood, frozen, her face flushing with shame and helplessness, knowing there was no way to justify her actions anymore. The FAA official didn't stop there. He continued, his tone now more serious, clearly aiming to clarify the entire situation. We've also checked Captain Whitman's work record in both the FAA's and Horizon Airlines internal systems. The results of this investigation are deeply disappointing and concerning. As this is not the first time Miss Whitman has engaged in such behavior, everyone's gaze became sharper, focusing entirely on the man delivering this shocking information. Whitman trembled, her face turning pale as she realized the truth she had tried to hide was now being exposed in front of everyone. Over the past 3 years, we've documented at least 3 official complaints regarding discriminatory behavior from Captain Whitman toward employees and customers of color. Specifically, the complaints clearly show that Miss Whitman repeatedly made unfounded accusations and assumptions based on personal bias, causing significant harm to the reputation and dignity of innocent individuals she targeted. These words hit like bullets, aimed directly at the career and reputation Whitman had worked so hard to build. The room grew louder, whispers and gossip quickly spreading, and Whitman felt every eye piercing into her as if searching her soul and moral integrity. At this moment, Elijah stood silently beside his father, feeling both relieved that the truth had come to light and saddened by the cruelty that prejudice could inflict on others. He glanced at his father, David Jackson, still standing there, his face stern, but his eyes calm. And it was his father who had brought justice, not just for Elijah, but for all the victims who had suffered unjust treatment in the past. Whitman, unable to bear the pressure any longer, weakly attempted to speak, pleading for sympathy from Mr. Jackson and the witnesses present. I'm truly sorry. I never intended to hurt anyone. I was just too worried about safety. Please give me a chance, Mr. Jackson immediately cut her off. His voice, still cold, but reasoned. Captain Whitman, this is not the first time you've caused such an incident. I believe everyone deserves forgiveness when they make a mistake. But forgiveness is only for those who acknowledge their errors and genuinely change. What you've shown here only further proves the severe ethical issues and deep-seated bias in your behavior. The aviation industry absolutely cannot tolerate such action. Continuing, he paused for a moment, his gaze stern, as he scanned the room, delivering this crucial message to everyone. I want all of you here to understand that prejudice and discrimination have no place in aviation, nor in any other profession. This is a great lesson, not just for Captain Whitman, but for all of us, about the true values of fairness, dignity, and mutual respect. Elijah felt prouder than ever of his father, the man who had bravely stood up for what was right. He knew that from this moment on, he would never forget this moment, the moment when the truth had been laid bare for everyone to see, after Mr. David Jackson's final words full of authority and determination echoed in the room. The space once again fell into heavy silence. But this time, it wasn't the silence of doubt or fear. Here, it was the silence of waiting and longing for a fair and clear decision. Jackson cast a sharp, stern glance around the room, his gaze lingering for a long time on Captain Whitman's pale and ashamed face, as if to firmly affirm that the wrongdoings she had committed would be held accountable. Finally, he spoke in a strong, clear voice, enunciating each word with resolve and unwavering determination as the administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration. Hereby immediately suspend Captain Rebecca Whitman from duty, and I request that the FAA work closely with Horizon Airlines to conduct a comprehensive investigation into her professional ethics, her ability to assess flight safety, and all of her recent activities until the investigation is completed. Captain Whitman will be prohibited from performing any flight duties, and all her powers will be temporarily revoked, effective immediately. Each word Jackson spoke felt like a thunderbolt striking at Whitman's career and pride. Oh, the woman once filled with authority and arrogance now stood, frozen, her complexion shifting from pale to bright red with shame and despair. She tried to speak, perhaps to offer an explanation or beg for forgiveness, but the words choked in her throat, unable to escape. At that moment, two airport security officers approached, with serious expressions, decisively carrying out the orders that had just been given. They stood beside Whitman and coldly announced, "Captain Whitman, please come with us immediately." Whitman lifted her head, her eyes pleading in desperation, but everyone present either turned away or looked at her with visible disappointment and contempt. There was no one left among her colleagues who had once respected and admired her, to speak out in her defense or show sympathy. Elijah stood silently beside his father, his heart filled with complex emotions. On one hand, he felt relief, knowing that justice had been served, the truth had been revealed, and he no longer had to endure any more unjust humiliation. But on the other hand, he felt a sense of sorrow witnessing someone pay the painful and public price for their serious mistakes. He understood. Now, the painful lesson about the unpredictable consequences of prejudice and arrogance, something his father had taught him many times. But it only truly became clear to him now. Whitman finally realized there was no turning back. She lowered her head and silently walked between the two security officers, each step feeling as though she were carrying a ton of stones as she passed by the pilot's lounge. The room remained in complete silence, every gaze following her every shameful step. It was a moment to remember, a stark reminder of how quickly power could vanish if it was not used properly and justly. Once Whitman's figure had disappeared through the door, Mr. Jackson calmly turned to the FAA officials and the airline leadership, giving the next set of instructions with efficiency and professionalism. I want the FAA and Horizon Airlines to work closely to ensure that this investigation is conducted in the most fair and transparent manner possible. We need to clearly identify the responsibility of every individual involved, while also reviewing all airport security and training procedures to ensure that no such incidents happen again in the future. The FAA officials and airline representatives nodded seriously, quickly beginning to implement Mr. Jackson's directives. Elijah looked at his father, and his heart swelled with pride, not just because of his father's dignity and decisiveness, but also because of the compassion and determination to uphold what was right that his father always taught him through his actions. Mr. Jackson turned to Elijah, his stern gaze softening as he looked at his beloved son. He gently placed his hand on Elijah's shoulder and spoke in a warm, comforting tone. Elijah, I'm very proud of you, not only because you stood firm in such a difficult situation, but also because you have maintained the dignity and resilience. I always hoped you would have this will be a great lesson in your life, and I'm sure that from now on, you will be even stronger when facing any challenge. Nodded slightly, his heart filled with gratitude and intense emotions that were hard to put into words. He knew that from today, his story would not just be about an unjust accusation and unfairness, but also the clearest proof of the triumph of what was right over prejudice and tyranny at this moment in the room that had just witnessed the dramatic reversal of power. And Justice Elijah understood that sometimes, though justice may come late, it will always prevail. And from this point forward, what he needed to do was continue to walk steadily on the challenging path with his father by his side to guide and accompany him. As Whitman's heavy footsteps gradually faded away from the pilot lounge door, the tension in the air slowly dissipated with them. Elijah still stood silently beside his father, his heart much lighter now, though it couldn't fully escape the echoes of the insult he had just endured. Mr. Jackson, noticing the faint worry still lingering in his son's eyes, gently squeezed Elijah's hand a little tighter, transmitting warmth and deep comfort. Elijah, remember this. The true worth of a person is measured by how they face adversity, not by the judgment of anyone else. I know just how strong you've been today, and I'm prouder of you than ever before. Elijah looked up at his father, recognizing the unwavering confidence and love reflected in his deep, affectionate gaze. His father's simple yet powerful words felt like a cool stream of water, washing away all the pain caused by prejudice. Little by little, the belief in himself and his future rekindled in his heart, making him stand taller, his expression calmer and more determined. At that moment, from among the pilots gathered around, a figure stepped forward with a confident yet approachable demeanor. It was Captain Amara Johnson, a black female pilot with over 20 years of flying experience, renowned not only for her exceptional skills, but also for her kindness and her advocacy for racial equality in aviation. She approached Elijah with a warm, genuine smile full of empathy and encouragement. Elijah, I'm Captain Amara Johnson. I'm really sorry for what you've just been through, but I want you to understand that the aviation industry is always open to people like you. Young, passionate, talented, and courageous. I'd love to invite you to come see the cockpit of the plane I'm about to fly, so you can experience firsthand the place where I believe you truly belong. Captain Johnson's heartfelt invitation immediately brightened Elijah's eyes with excitement. He looked to his father for permission and received a gentle but meaningful nod from Mr. Jackson. That moment seemed to fill Elijah with renewed strength, allowing him to cast aside all his earlier worries and move forward with an open heart as they walked out of the pilot lounge. With Captain Johnson, Elijah could clearly feel the change in the eyes and attitudes of those around them. No longer were there any doubts or scrutinizing glances. Only warm, encouraging looks, and even sincere apologies from other airport staff and pilots. Elijah realized that justice wasn't just about punishing those who had wronged him, but also about restoring honor and dignity to the one who had been hurt. In a fair and clear manner, along the long airport hallway, Elijah and Captain Johnson walked and talked. She shared valuable experiences from her flying career, including the challenges she faced when first entering aviation, especially the persistent prejudices that had made her want to give up at times. Elijah: "I've been through moments like yours today. I felt the deep pain of being doubted and judged just because of the color of my skin and my background. But then I realized that the best way to overcome prejudice isn't through anger or resentment, but by proving to them that we not only deserve our place, but can excel far beyond what they imagine." Her words struck deep into Elijah's soul, making him even more aware of the path ahead. He felt incredibly grateful for Captain Johnson's presence at such a crucial moment, not just for the trust and hope she had instilled in him, but also for being a living example of strength and courage in the face of prejudice and adversity. Finally, they stopped before the door to the cockpit of the Boeing 787. The plane Captain Johnson would be flying on her upcoming flight. The cockpit door opened, revealing a series of glowing control panels, button screens, and a complex yet fascinating system. Elijah felt his heart race, filled with both excitement and deep emotion. Captain Johnson smiled at the young boy, gently placed her hand on his shoulder, and spoke with a firm, reassuring voice. "This is the place where I believe you will stand in the not-too-distant future. Elijah, don't let anyone or anything make you doubt your abilities or your place. The sky is always wide enough to welcome those who are brave enough to step forward." Elijah looked into her eyes, a powerful wave of emotion rising within him. He understood that this was a precious moment, one that fully restored his faith in the future he had always dreamed of in his heart. There was no longer room for fear or doubt, only a strong belief that he truly belonged here in the vast and challenging sky above. And in that moment, as Elijah stepped into the cockpit, he knew that his life was about to begin, a whole new chapter where honor, hope, and the dream of soaring freely in the sky would all always be cherished, protected, and realized through all his effort and courage. After the unforgettable moment when Elijah took his first step into the cockpit of the Boeing 787. With Captain Amara Johnson, the story of the young boy seemed to unfold a whole new chapter. Elijah was no longer just a teenager, overcoming a personal challenge. Now he had become a living symbol of fairness, courage, and faith in the future that the aviation industry was striving toward. As for David Jackson, after the turbulent events that had transpired, he realized deeply that prejudice and racism still existed as a latent threat to the aviation industry and society at large. In his role as the FAA administrator, he decided to take bold and decisive action, launching a large-scale campaign to diversify the workforce within aviation, with a special emphasis on eradicating all forms of racial, gender, or class-based prejudice. Within just a few short weeks, the FAA introduced a series of new programs targeting youth across the country, aimed at creating fair and transparent opportunities for young people passionate about joining the aviation industry. These programs not only provided access to cutting-edge education and training, but also focused on raising awareness about equal rights, diversity, and the spirit of solidarity. The core message that Jackson conveyed was clear and strong. Everyone, no matter their background, deserves to soar as high and as far as their dreams can take them. Meanwhile, Elijah, who had once endured the painful injustice, had now become a prominent youth ambassador for the FAA. He was invited to numerous schools, workshops, and community events to share his own story, spreading the empowering message no one should have to suffer fear or injustice because of their race or background while pursuing their dreams. Each time he stood before the eager, hopeful faces of young people. Elijah no longer felt the hesitation or anxiety he once had. He confidently recounted his experiences, from the pain and despair of being subjected to prejudice and discrimination to the moment when justice was strongly and clearly upheld. Thanks to the timely intervention of his father and the FAA, Elijah emphasized that, although in life, injustice and prejudice can sometimes shake our faith in the end, truth and justice will always prevail if one is courageous enough to face and fight against it. Elijah realized that he was no longer just a storyteller. He had become an inspiration and motivator for young people like him, those who might once have feared that their background, family situation, or skin color would hinder their dreams. He always ended his talks with a simple yet powerful phrase: never forget that the aviation industry or any other profession needs people like you. Diversity is strength, and every dream deserves protection. I am here today to affirm that the future is always open to those brave enough to step forward and pursue what they believe in. Elijah's heartfelt words were always met with enthusiastic applause, bright-eyed gazes, and even tearful moments of emotion from those listening in this way. Elijah's story became not just his own, but a collective story, inspiring many young people to break through their limitations and fears to reach for even greater dreams. As for Captain Whitman, after a thorough and transparent investigation by the FAA, she had to face severe consequences for her wrongful actions. Although painful, this was necessary to send a clear message that no one has the right to use their power to harm others based on personal prejudice. Whitman losing her position. An authority was a vivid testament to the power of justice, showing that no one is above the law or professional ethics, thanks to the decisive and swift actions from Jackson. The story didn't just end as an isolated event. It became a turning point, driving significant and positive change throughout the aviation industry. Airports and airlines across the United States began rigorously reviewing all their processes, providing employees with comprehensive training on social awareness and cultural diversity. Like never before, through this entire dramatic, intense event, everyone recognized the dangerous power of prejudice, but also felt the immense power and potential for change that justice and social responsibility can bring. The change in the central character, from a mother CEO to a father FAA administrator, made the enforcement of justice more powerful, clear, and direct than ever before. This helped deliver a profound, sharp message. Every dream deserves protection, and no one should have to pay the price of fear because of differences in skin color, status, or family background. For Elijah, every step forward in his life was now not just for himself, but also to continue spreading these human values, helping society move closer to a future where everyone is treated with the dignity, respect, and fairness they deserve. Through Elijah Jackson's emotional and dramatic story, we see the devastating impact that prejudice can have, but we also witness the tremendous strength of justice and social responsibility when it is executed firmly and clearly. No one deserves to experience injustice or sacrifice their dreams because of their skin color, status, or background. What about you? Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination due to prejudice? Share your story or thoughts in the comments so we can spread the message of equality and fairness together. If you found this video meaningful, please leave a like, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. Thank you for listening. See you in the next video.